Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I share my recent keynote remarks at Administration Day in Colombia titled COVID-19, Virtual Labor, and Economic and Employee Well-Being in the Future of Work. I was invited today to share some thoughts in relation to COVID-19, the virtual labor, economic and employee well-being, the future of work, and entrepreneurial activities that will support international economy as we move out of the pandemic. I want to frame this up really quickly and then quickly move into more of the specific application and the types of questions you may have. Clearly, the pandemic has shown us the importance of human capital and the importance of having people-centered organizations. There's never been a clearer time where the role of empathy and compassion as a leader, that skill set has been more important. As people have been struggling and as organizations have struggled to shift to a virtual or a hybrid work environment. Even pre-pandemic, I would say, I'm biased, but I would say that the human capital of an organization is the top and most important asset that an organization has at its disposal. And that's not to say that other forms of capital, other forms of assets aren't important. Clearly they are. Plants, property, equipment, financial capital, intellectual capital, all is super important. But without the people in the organization doing the work, creating and innovating and providing value in a strong customer experience for the customer base, the company will cease to be competitive and will cease to add value to the market. And so we can't allow ourselves, even though it's tempting, we can't allow ourselves to skimp on our investment in our people as we're dealing with difficult times. And I would say, especially when we're dealing with difficult times. In this diagram, you can see this is a very simplistic view of kind of the flow of impact that we see in just a couple aspects of the huge body of research in this area. So let's take, for example, interesting jobs, which encompasses job design, engaging work, and those sorts of things. So on the top, you see interesting jobs. On the bottom, you see knowledge sharing or having a knowledge sharing culture, a growth culture within the organization. And then you can see, as you follow the flow chart, each of these arrows and each of the boxes represent a huge body of research that has been done that shows these impacts. So when you have well-designed jobs that are interesting, that are engaging, where people find meaning, fulfillment, purpose in their work, where they feel like they have the opportunity to contribute back to society and that their work matters, when that's the case, you have more satisfied workers, which leads to more satisfied customers, that leads to higher sales, higher profits. When workers are more engaged, more satisfied, more motivated, you have lower levels of absenteeism, lower turnover, et cetera. All these negative behaviors go down. That reduces costs, and that leads to higher profits. Now, again, this is overly simplistic, but you get the picture. This is hugely important to think about job design. Also, in terms of the culture. So one aspect of culture is having a knowledge sharing environment. If I have a knowledge sharing environment and a growth culture within my organization where people feel psychologically safe, to challenge the status quo, to try new things, to iterate, to experiment, and all those sorts of things, and share what they're learning with other people, that clearly leads to higher levels of innovation, higher levels of productivity, both of which, of course, lead to higher quality, more satisfied customers, more revenues and sales, higher profits. And so the business case for having a people-centric orientation in our businesses is super high and very clear. That's says nothing about the human case. Clearly, we should treat everyone with dignity and respect in our businesses. Clearly, we should focus on the needs of people because they're human beings and they're people that deserve our attention. So the human case, of course, is there. But even if we set the human case aside, the human case is clear, and we need to create a people-centric organization in order to have high-performance work systems, to be able to navigate within complexity, within nuance, within the uncertainty that we see really anytime in the globalized economy, but particularly during this pandemic. So I want to talk for just a few minutes about technological innovations influencing shifting working conditions. Now, over the past 50 to 70 years, we've seen huge shifts in the nature of work across the globe. 50, 60, 70 years ago, the predominant sector of the economy in most countries was either industrial or agricultural. Now, for example, in the United States, back in the 50s and 60s, industrial economy, that segment of the economy made up about 2/3 or more of the overall US economy. Today, we're over 80% service sector in our economy, with about 16, 17% that is production, and then 3% that's agriculture. So this huge shift in the sectoral composition of the workplace has also resulted in huge shifts in the nature of work, the conditions, the characteristics of work, the type of leaders that are needed in the workplace, and how work is manifest as people are carrying out their work. So leading up to the pandemic, that has only continued to accelerate. That shift has moved more and more as we have more of a knowledge-based economy and a service-based economy, as we become increasingly globally interconnected. And organizations and leaders have had to grapple for decades on how to do that more effectively. Now, enter the pandemic, and what have we seen? There is already a trend upwards in terms of the increase in the gig economy, the increase in the contingent workforce, and an increase in computing power and the ability for technology, the disruptive technologies that have started to reshape industries, reshape professions, reshape jobs, tasks, and the type of work that we do. All of this was, over from 2000 on up, we continue to see this steady progression. And most pundits and analysts pre-pandemic considered that within the next 10 to 15 years, we would see a fundamental realignment of mega organizations around the globe, of the nature of professions and job tasks, and that labor markets would be disrupted and reconfigured, all of that. So that was already the prognosis pre-pandemic. And then COVID happens. During COVID, of course, on a dime, we had to be able to shift to virtual work. Frontline workers, of course, there were some jobs where people were in person, but the vast majority of work went online almost immediately. And what this did is it forced people that were hesitant, who were resistant to adopting some of these new technological innovations, many of which had already existed, but had been slow to be adopted. It forced people to adopt and to learn them and to gain comfort with them, people that probably never would have otherwise. And many organizations, many leaders who were skeptical about the notion of virtual work and how would they monitor their employees and how would they make sure things got done, those types of questions, they were forced to figure it out. employees that may have not been keen on the idea of virtual work were forced to figure it out. And all of a sudden, we're 18 plus months into the pandemic, with many people not only having spent a good chunk, if not the majority of the past 18 plus months working virtually, perhaps they still are working virtually, but people have grown accustomed to it. People have grown comfortable with it. People have learned the new technologies, and we're never going back. And in fact, the technologies have only improved over the past 18 plus months due to the usage and due to the increased revenues for these technology companies. And we see even more platforms, more use cases, and the ability to improve the experience. And this has only led to further implementation. So we know, for example, in the HR field, data analytics, HR analytics, human resource information systems, and various workforce integrations of technology have increased exponentially. It was already happening pre-pandemic, and it's only accelerated during the pandemic. That's just one kind of an example. There are so many examples, and there are so many different technological innovations that have occurred over the past 10 plus years and have just accelerated over the past 18 plus months. And what that means is we're going to have a really different type of work experience for the younger generation than many of us are experiencing or have experienced in the past. So let's talk for a minute about some of the skills that are needed in the future workplace. So this comes from the Institute for the Future Work Skills Report 2020 and 2011. And they outline some of the major drivers of change. And I've already mentioned some of these a little bit. We're in an increasingly computational world, superstructured organizations, in the mega corporation. We have globally connected world, new media ecology, rise of smart machines and systems, extreme longevity. And we could spend a lot of time just dissecting those drivers and trying to better understand what all the reasons are behind those and how they're influencing the nature of work. But for now, I'll just put those out there as important drivers, important factors that influence the way things are changing. Within the diagram in the middle, you see some of those skills, competencies, and capabilities that are increasingly necessary as we move into the future of work. And I would say absolutely necessary for organizational leaders and executives, but also for the line employees. For every employee in the organization, we need them to develop these competencies if we hope to be competitive and adaptive and innovative as we move into a really fast-paced shifting nature of work and a globalized economy that continues to adjust in real time. Things like cognitive load management, virtual collaboration, new media literacy, cross-cultural competencies, designed thinking and mindset, novel adaptive thinking, sense-making, transdisciplinarity. We could add others, but this is a really good list of the types of skills and capabilities that are going to be needed. I'm excited to announce the publication of my new book from HCI Press, Bluer Than Indigo Leadership: The Journey of Becoming a Truly Remarkable Leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There's no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of our problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for individuals, teams, and organizations. What does this mean for all of us? Well, my firm, Human Capital Innovations, we put together a research brief. I won't have time to get into all the details with you today, but we looked at designing work during COVID-19 and implications for managers in the future of work. I would refer you to this. You can go to innovativehumancapital.com, go to our research section, and we have this and many other materials that are free and accessible. And you can see not only the research behind the study and those findings, but we also have practical questions and applications for leaders as they're trying to think through what this means for their organization during the pandemic and as we move out of the pandemic. Just say a couple more things about the rise of the gig economy and the contingent workforce and the need and the role for entrepreneurial activities as we continue into the future of work. And then I'll just open it up for questions. As I mentioned earlier, there's been a clear trend, a fairly sharp increase in the level of the gig economy and the level of the contingent workforce and contract workers and employees over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And that has just taken a sharp increase over the pandemic. So we see even more of it nowadays. And this is fueled in two ways. In one way, younger millennial workers and Gen Z workers, they simply like the flexibility of being their own boss. They have a skill set. They can rent out their talent to organizations on their own terms, make good money, and there's really great platforms out there that allow them to put their services out there to the world and work on their own terms as a gig worker, as a contingent or contract worker. So employees increasingly, especially younger employees, but employees of all ages, and perhaps even some older employees who are reaching retirement age and want to retire from their traditional career, but still want to continue doing some work and ramp down their work as they move into retirement. It's being heavily utilized, and employees increasingly want this kind of flexibility. But also employers are seeking similar types of flexibility. So bringing on even part-time employees is more rigid. And if you start talking about salaried benefits receiving full-time employees, the legal complexities of that go up, the expense to the organization goes up. And so organizations increasingly are going to these gig economy platforms to rent talent and find the skills that they need on a project basis rather than employing a person, as an employee within the organization. And so we continue to see more and more of that in recent years. And I think that is the continued trend. This doesn't mean that people are going to stop working for corporations or starting their own businesses, and traditional entrepreneurial activity will continue, but there's an increasing number of people that are just going to hang their own shingle. They're going to join these various gig economy platforms, and they're going to rent out their skills and be their own boss and do it on their own terms. And the technologies of today and the continued disruptive technologies only increase the viability of that option for a lot of employees. It increases the opportunity. And now I can rent top talent from anyone in the world. I'm not limited to my geographic location. So just like I'm joining you now from Utah for this presentation, and you're in Colombia, I can connect with anyone anywhere in the world as long as there's a decent internet connection and work with them. And I'm not limited to geographic proximity. That opens up the labor market, that opens up opportunity, but that also opens up competitiveness amongst those vying for those opportunities. So all of this shapes the current condition and ultimately will continue, something that organizational leaders are going to have to continue to wrestle with.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how do you think it will be more easier to make that change happen? Like adapt people that are not like kind of used to that skills that you named at that point. And how do you think it will be more easier to make that change happen? Because for millennials, it's kind of more easier because we kind of grow up with all these technologies and all of that, all of this stuff. So I wanted to know, how do you think it will be more easier for like older people or something like that?
Yeah, there's no question that we need to prioritize the resources that we're putting towards the reskilling and upskilling of the workforce. We know right now the labor market is very competitive in many parts of the world. In the U.S., for example, it's a very tight labor market. Organizations are really struggling to find good workers for the jobs that are out there, even with increasing wages. And so we can't afford to just bring in new people. There's not enough new people to fill all the STEM and tech types of jobs that are needed for the future of the economy. So what we need to do is we need to invest in reskilling and upskilling the current workforce and help them to establish the skills that they need. And that's not going to be easy. But if we prioritize it and invest in it, it can be done. And we can help people that have had a long, successful career in one area become prepared for, new occupations, new jobs, new tasks that maybe we haven't even thought of yet, that currently don't exist, but will in, say, 5 or 10 years from now. You make a good point. Many younger employees are digital natives. They have grown up using these technologies. And sometimes we assume that they're automatically going to be better using these technologies than older workers. But of course, anytime we're generalizing, that doesn't always hold true. And there are younger workers that still struggle with the technologies. There are older workers that are excellent with the technologies. And so we just need to remember that and come up with a holistic strategy to that reskilling and upskilling of our workforce, identifying the skills gaps that exist within our current employees, understand what skills are needed for the future types of work and jobs that are needed in our company, and then provide the training or partner with other institutions, universities to get the training so that we can be prepared.
Thank you.
The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership. Ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.